I am anticipating this stream about fandoms to be very fun and very not inclusive, as in I will be totally excluded from this conversation because I don't have really much to contribute.
Alek, what are you talking about? Before the stream, you told me that you've been, leader of music communities or something.
I was the leader of music community in
So,
the region,
yeah,
but that was like long ago when I was small.
Well, whatever.
I wasn't bullied, I was the one bullying, so...
That's fine, I was bullying also.
But I think, like, that's a cool thing about fandom, right? Is, like, if you add its, like, core essence, like, a fan is just someone who's, like, super passionate about something. So you can be a fan of community building. You can be a fan of the internet. You can be a fan of the community show podcast. Like, you can be a fan of a lot of things, but I think it could be potentially, like when we start to think about, like, what is a community and what is a fandom, I think when we start to put these, like, strict barriers in it, we actually kind of limit ourselves to what things could be and like what cool things could happen. And
that
I think
was the short demo. And that was a short demo. We're gonna happen in the next 20 minutes.
Yes.
Before that, let's make a short intro.
Yeah. Let's introduce ourselves.
And also, like a fun fact that we had Patrick from Orbit, we had Josh from Orbit, we had Kevin from Orbit, and now we have Erin from Orbit. So like
we love
like
Orbit very much.
Are we working for Orbit?
Not yet, Anna.
Yeah.
They're getting it there. Like Kevin wasn't at Orbit as well while we were like getting him on the podcast. So like soon, wait for it. Lera, who are you and what are you doing?
Okay, hello, I'm Lera. I'm a community manager of this community, and also I was Twilight hater back in times. So I passed my microphone to the Twilight fan.
Hello, I am Anna. I am writer, and back in the day I was writing fan fiction about Twilight and Harry Potter and crossovers with this universe.
Love it.
Alek?
And I was bullied, so that's the difference.
I have zero value to contribute to the Twilight conversation. Okay. So like there is like a community of Twilight fans, then there is a community of Twilight, like anti-Twilight fans, and I can be a member of a community of anti-Twilight fans. So like the community who hates those who hate Twilight fans. Like, can it be like that?
Yes.
Erin, which community do you belong to?
I love that. I'm Erin. I work at Orbit as a community advocate and do some community things on the side depending on the day. But I kind of like have this obsession with fandom lately and kind of got into it in grad school and never really left. But I'm kind of a participant in sports fandom. So I'm a huge baseball fan, but also got super sucked into Harry Potter when that was a thing, went to the midnight book releases and dressed up as Luna Lovegood one Halloween.
Oh my god!
So
she was my favorite! Oh my god!
And was a super active member of the geocaching/forest fen community, so obscure outdoors hiking fandoms.
Great or beautiful call.
Yeah. All
nice.
Did you know that? Oh, I think you will know that Luna Lovegood was often paired with Neville Longbottom in the Harry Potter fandom.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes,
I do remember that being a thing. That was a thing.
It's disgusting. I hated him so much.
Very fun to listen to. I also don't understand what's going on. How do you make this so a little more inclusive? So, for example, I have something at least like to not to. Where do we start?
You cannot anyway.
Well, I think I think a lot of like fandom and communities have a ton of overlap, and I think that's what we're so quick to be like, it's a fandom, it's a community, and I'm like, why not both? Like, I think that's a very valid
What's the difference
thing.
Actually between fandom and community then? Like,
I don't think there is.
I think so. It totally we're still very much defining because like I think if you ask 10 community builders, they'd give you 10 different answers, and if you ask 10 people participating in fandom, they'd probably give you the same 10 different answers. Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, at its core, both of them are people who are interested in something or pursuing some goal or higher vision together. So people doing something together. And I think I really want to emphasize, like, it's doing something. You can't be a fan of something just kind of sitting on your hands. And it's kind of hard to be a community member if you're not active or participating in some way, shape, form, even if participating is just observing. So you could be a really big fan of a podcast, but if you're only if you are a religious listener of that podcast that listens every Tuesday, you're still a fan. It's just your participation might be different than someone else, which is okay.
I think there is one core difference between like general, like the community show community and, for example, okay, supernatural fandom.
Oh my god,
Too late,
Sabrina,
too
I
late.
was there.
See, we unraveled your fandom. So
I forgot about this. Yeah, go on. I'm sorry.
I think the difference is that you like a piece of media very passionately because it relates to you as a person somehow. I don't think it's like, I don't know if there is a podcast that I will find that I will love so passionately that it will make
Ohio?
me um you make it, I like it, but not as much as
Like my TikToks.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I
I mean-
think there is that difference between very
But-
of being
Yeah.
very personal.
Yeah, and I think that's a personal difference. Like, I'm not a huge podcast listener personally. I love Terrible. Thanks for asking the podcast, and I love like everything that, and like I'm a huge fan of Nora McInerney. But like if you were like Erin, like ask about like a lot of like the common, I'm not someone who consumes podcasts 5, 6, 7 hours a week, if that. Like I'm a very like infrequent listener, and when I do listen to podcasts, I do kind of like binge through them really quickly. So I think that's like a really interesting thing to think through of like, how are we talking about fandom, and like in the context of like fandom's kind of like an intimate thing in many ways. Like, what are people like? It's kind of like we don't always surface all of our fandoms, and
Yes.
when we start to think about it, it's like you can be a fan and you're still an active participant, but sometimes it's like okay if that's not like a public thing. Like you're still engaging online. Even I think a lot of times, especially in fan fiction, you go under an alias, so you don't go under your quote unquote real name or another identity. But you're still participating, and that's still like part of you. And I think like when it comes to personal identity in fandom, like we all have multiple facets of ourselves, which is cool, and we should embrace that.
Like what I'm struggling to really understand is like fandom is usually a huge thing. Like you are usually a part of like a multi-million club of people who love or hate certain thing. And what about the sense of belonging? Can you belong to a club of 1 million people?
Yes,
or
I think
100,000
I will jump in before Erin answered the question. I think yes, because usually even those fandoms, they combine in the smaller communities. Let's say like Russian Twilight fandom. It's like not that big
still
as like
500,000.
yeah, and then like it divides even to smaller groups.
Saratov.
I mean, it can be different. Like I don't know, art Russian Twilight fandom or something
I think
like
it
this.
also is divided by ships. Like you ship Edward and
Yeah,
Bella
also
together,
like this.
or Alice and Bella if you're into that kind of stuff. Or so it's very different. It's big, but you have that sub niche for sure.
Yeah. Erin, what do you think about this?
I mean, I think that's the same thing we think about as like when we think of like fandom. Like it's really interesting to think about is like, how do we describe? You kind of all identified. We all talked about what we're really into and like how we identified with the fandom. Like we have Twilight fans, we have Twilight haters here, which is totally cool. Like I'm not here to like tell people what to like or not like. That's be a nice person, do good things, don't harm other people. That's at the core what we should be operating for as a society. But I also think on that tangent, like I'm a baseball fan. I like the Chicago Cubs. There's a lot of other Chicago Cubs fans out here. That's totally cool. But if I go to a game and I see someone wearing a Cubs hat, I can like fist bump them. We can acknowledge that this year they traded all the good players away and we all want to cry. We can acknowledge certain traditions or rituals together. We know that we fly the W after every win, and we partake together and can share these things, even though we may have never met in person. But that does create a feeling of belonging. I think of anybody who's ever attended like a Comic-Con event. If you attend a Comic-Con and I walk up to a Star Wars booth, there's like a base lingo that we're all going to be able to understand.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. I think even like when we're starting to introduce, or like for those who have participated in fan forums, it's really cool because it's like, oh my goodness, like we've probably, I've had that feeling online when you're like, these people understand me. I feel heard. I feel like I matter, which is at the core of it. It's not like what belonging and community is, like just feeling heard, valued, loved.
I wanna throw in something in the controversial. So fandom. Usually when we think about fandom, it's about like some fictional thing, like some piece of art, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Can we build communities, like for example, technical communities, professional communities on the same pillars, on the same biorhythms that the fandoms are built? around like content probably, or around, I don't know, around rock stars in coding, in anything, in tech.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can build. I've seen a lot of like cool obscure fandoms. I'm super into like the fermentation subreddit, which is like pickling and like beer
Moonshine.
making, and like I'm personally into like growing some weird mold in my fridge, but you know, to each their own. But like in like even like these like subgroups, there's people that you're like, oh my goodness, user blah 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 posted this new recipe, I need to try it. Or like we build up, like even we subscribe, like I think of like GitHub stars, people who like are famous for like open source development. That kind of is like we already start to naturally build that relationship. Or even in the way that we like have our online communities, right? Like there's people like, oh my goodness, so and so followed me on Twitter. Like we all get that like warm fuzzy. Like I think we all have that person that if they were to follow you on Twitter tomorrow, you'd be like, oh, I feel like I made it. But I think that's part of fandom, even at like the very micro root of it. Like I think at the core, I really hope that when we think of fandom and communities, like I think we're really quick to label things, which is totally fine, and I get it. But maybe like we're labeling for the sake of labeling. Like, can we just have fun and build relationships?
Maybe that's the core pillars of the community in 2021 and further on. Like it's like built on true relationships and like not on marketing messages, but like people are there because they enjoy being there, not because they can get their questions answered. But
I was teaching this man to talk like this for half a year. So.
Yeah,
I feel
we practice every morning, like you know, like morning exercise, like to the wall, like talk community values.
Yeah,
yes.
repeat it. Yeah, because before he was like, yeah, marketing, selling shit, blah blah blah. But like, nah.
Rick, like this dude has been in community relations or in developer relations for 13 years. Like that has been my job, to explain people why they should love something and hate whatever I don't represent. Like that's how this brain functions. And to switch it to fandom like values, like to human values, it's hard.
It's interesting, right? So like I joke all the time, I had an accidental stumble into community. And I think like that's where we originally crossed paths, is I literally stumbled into being a community person. So I was working as a product manager doing a lot of user research, and then all of a sudden they're like, Erin, you're pretty good at this community thing. And I'm like, that's cool, I guess. And they're like, Erin, do you want to be our head of community? And I was like, I guess. But then I'm like, oh crap, I've never done that in my life.
But Erin,
and I like had to like, yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is just super interesting. That like you got into the community, you got this role, I think in a very, very unique way. Like can you double down a bit like on that like what you were studying and working on and like how that got you into the community? Since I think that's unique. I at least I didn't hear any similar stories anywhere. So
yeah, no, I think I got into community on a total whim. Kind of one of the first things I did in community space, and actually can find it, that kind of landed me that role. But in a very loose way, is like we had a Discord community. It's fairly active, and then we started doing like online shopping sprees on a Google spreadsheet, which is like, I didn't think it was community. I was like, this is just fun and on the internet, and I like just having fun on the internet. And the next thing I know, it was like, oh, that's community building, and I'm like,
oh, that's what I was doing.
I'm like, oh, that's what it's called. And then I like honestly like freaked out. And I like joke, I now work with Rosie, but at the time I didn't. I panicked, like DM'd her and was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Please help. And like, it was great because she kind of slowed down and explained to me, like, this is what community is. Like, this is like all these like little things you've been doing throughout your life, the ways you've been participating, the ways that you've ran meetups before. That's community. You just never had a community job title. Like I had job titles from, you know, designer to researcher to, you know, product, which is not. I had a job title for like 3 years that was director of everything. So I'll let you know, like, which is like cool, but like, that's like a very like, you don't see that job title, you know, like that's not a thing.
Well, we have a job title like that. Lera calls herself the queen of fucking everything. So.
Oh yes. Yeah, I mean.
That's her official job title, yes.
Yes. Usually I'm telling this to everybody. Let's talk about fandoms, because I think this is a very interesting topic. We never talked about this because I saw the document that you wrote, I guess, and like I really want to talk about the bad side of fandoms. The last thing that you wrote, like about like that fandoms can go bad too.
Yeah, I think unfortunately we do get like fandoms do get a bad rap, and
Yes.
they can have a very bad rap, and they can get a really bad taste in our mouth. Like we've all kind of been there. Like if I were, a Cubs fan that all of a sudden decided that I wanted to be a White Sox fan in baseball, like they'd be like, And I think there's like these very real dynamics that happen that it can, like, I think when we start to get exclusionary, or when we talk about, I actually was having a conversation with someone this week about when are communities cults? And it's kind of like the same thing. It's like when you start having like hard and fast, you need to participate this way and on this time schedule, that's when it can be like, ooh, maybe not. And I think like, I don't know, we're all human here. Be good, do good, operate, give people the benefit of the doubt. Not everybody's 100% all the time. People are human.
And those kind of people who are like coming to you with a quiz, like, oh, you don't know, like this kind of
childhood trauma. Okay, tell about the whole story. Tell the whole story.
No, there is no whole story. This is just like
there
a
is
usual
whole story.
No, there is no whole story.
This is how you stop telling people which music do you listen to.
Oh yes, because like every time like in my teenage years I'm like, okay, I love this band, and like some guy coming like, oh, so what's the name of wife of a second guitarist that died like 5 years ago? And you're like, I don't know, I like the music, I like the band, but I'm not that huge fan.
And then you're excluded.
And then they're like, you're just a poser, you're not real fan, I'm like, okay.
I smell sexism here, like very.
But also like,
That's
when did it become
normality.
cool to? When did it become cool to like gatekeep people's interests? Like, you like at the end of the day, like if you're like, I really like this, as long as you are not like harming someone or like being exclusionary or like, what is the thing, like racist, sexist, a jerk, like as long as like don't be like gross on the internet and be hateful, and who cares? Like I could be like, I love blue raspberry flavoring, I think it's the greatest thing, which honestly I love artificial blue raspberry flavoring. As artificial flavors go, it's top tier. But if someone else hates it, like, who cares? I'm not harming anybody. It's okay. We'll all breathe. Like, and like that, that's where fandom can get really toxic and gatekeepy.
Yes. Like, well, right now I can't understand this because, well, I grew up a bit, but like back in my teenage years, I was also like, I was a huge hater of Twilight girls. I was like, how I'm saying, like, I was like, oh my God, they're like so stupid. Oh my God, I don't want to be with them. So,
but here's an interesting twist on that though. Like there also is anti-fandom. So not liking a fandom so much is also part of fandom. Like,
yes.
Like mind blowing, right? Like that's like such a fascinating thing to think about. And you've probably built other relationships with other anti-fans. Which like,
yes.
Am I cool that it exists? Like, not necessarily, like, obviously like we all hope that people don't like things, but like there are fandoms, like you've probably seen it with like a series or a trilogy that you guys loved or like a TV show, and they make a change and you're like, man, that really sucked. Like I liked this series. Like I like James Bond. I'm pretty stoked for the new James Bond film. But like people are like Daniel Craig, you gotta go. Like you've been the oldest Bond ever. Like you're done. Get out of here. And I'm like, I like Daniel Craig. I thought he was kind of a cool Bond. Like, but like those are starting to see, and you like, or when they're like, who was the best Spider-Man actor? Like that's when you start to see these divides, like of these very hot takey subgroups within these fandoms, which they're totally valid. As long as you're not harming anybody else.
I mean, that kind of answers the question, Alec, that you asked before about belonging. So, like, something happens, you get divided.
You're gonna love or you're gonna hate.
Yes.
And like, you need 5 million people. Like, 5 million people army to hate the other army of 5 million people.
Yes.
You hope it's more productive. Like, you hope it's more productive than...
the more people, like the army.
I don't know. It's very... usually that toxicity is very prevalent because, again, it's very personal for some people. I remember when the Hunger Games cast was announced, everyone hated that cast, and it was... the whole fandom was angry. They were posting pictures. This is not the guy I was expecting. And this is not the guy.
I don't remember this already. Oh my God.
Yeah. And I think but even like so even I want to say like there's an article I read, I'll have to dig it up. Of course, it's not one I linked. But so going back to like what is fandom and what is community, like what does it mean? You build things by doing. So you build relationships by doing. So it's natural that like if you do something, it is personal. Like if I wrote a fan fiction essay, that is personal. If I took a trip to go to a Comic-Con, that now becomes personal because I'm putting part of myself and like social identity theory to kind of put the social science behind it. Like we shape our identity based on like the groups we belong to. So like when we all came up here and we're like, I'm a Cubs fan, I'm a Twilight fan, I'm not a Twilight fan. That's how we get these parts of our identity that are like really interesting to start thinking about. And like how we're like, we're what is it? Like the Shrek thing. It's like, I love Shrek, by the way.
Oh my
big
God,
Shrek
also...
fan.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
but, like,
yes, oh my God.
but it's like, I'm like, you're like an onion. Like I have layers. I keep like proposing to the,
Yes.
I keep telling the like Orbit model team that like we should like rebrand to the onion model, but like hasn't taken on yet. So.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I love you so much.
But I think like in all of that, it's like in all of these layers, we have layers that are like can take a beating, and they're like, I'm like, oh yeah, the Cubs, they kind of, I've been a Cubs fan since a child that came from a family of Cubs and Mariners fans. Like they kind of suck. I understand. I fully recognize my team's probably gonna lose.
That's the irony. Sometimes you want to go to the neighbor community to get the beating, like so, and that's how it works. That's part of the fun.
I like you have weird definition of fun, but it's okay.
Well, it's like it's part of the experience. Like it is totally like I lived in Nevada for nearly 10 years during my time there. They created like the first, it was a huge thing for those of you who follow hockey. They created the Golden Knights hockey team. And the very first year out of the gate, they won the whole dang thing. And so now that I moved to New York, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a Golden Knights fan because it was the local team when I first went, and I got to go to a few games and it was fun. And they're like, you're just like a poser because you liked it because they were the team that won right up. And I'm like, well, actually, first off, yes. But like, I'm like not a regular hockey fan, but like, I'll take that one. But also I'm going to have some fun talking some smack, playing some, love like my like favorite side hobby is bar trivia. Like, I think bar trivia is like amazing. I think it's great. I love it. But random obscure trivia is like, and like getting stupidly competitive over it. I like, that is a competitive outlet for me. But it's like all in good fun. And I think that's part of participating in these ways and like these groups, which is a fun way of participating.
And Erin, I mean, I'm listening to you, and until right now, until whatever, 34 minutes ago, since we started talking to you, I was thinking that this kind of mindset, that's like a very, very Zoomer thing.
No.
But yeah. No? Okay.
No.
Okay, bash me.
I think
Bash me.
I think like fandom's been around. Like P.T. Barnum was like the original like circus guy was a fandom, or like John Wilkes Booth, like to talk about anti-fans, like the way that John Wilkes Booth, who's the guy who shot Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, the American president, he had a very like, if there's actually like a book about it, like he had a very obscure like fandom that followed him, and he like crafted himself as like the like evil villain, like I shot a president, but I'm also like, if I'm remembering right, it was like I'm also like this like sexy bad guy vibe. And it's just like, which I'm like, you think about it, or like even like the P.T. Barnum, like those circus acts that were originally thing, that's part of fandom, because at its core, it's like people who are excited to do things together, which is, we've had that forever. Like it's,
then
we just
why
now are.
Don't we have the books about that? Like, why don't we build developer communities? Why don't we build, I don't know, Notion user communities? Using this fandom, like using emotions, using relations, using what has been there forever in the fandom universe.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do. So I think that's what I'm personally like trying to do, is like, I think that's like really important.
Does it work?
But like, I don't have a really great answer on like, I like to think that that's important. And I think like we should treat people with kindness and like just be excited about people being excited. But that always doesn't equate to business values. And that's sometimes where people are like, oh, you nerded out on a podcast for an hour about fans. Like, excuse me, like, did that bring me like, how many dollars did I get off of that? Like, that's not a business metric that you can commonly measure. Like, you know, but it's a lot about playing the like long game. It's about like building those actual authentic relationships. It's about, I think like, like you're kind of talking about like feeling salesy at times. I'm like, I hate sales. I'm like, I don't want to sell people things. Like, I just want to have a good time and like have a great time, embrace new things, meet new people. If I can help them out along the way, great. Like, let's learn together. And it's like kind of like a scratch my back, scratch yours, because in this world together as a society, and like
Yes, I
nice
agree with
to-
you so much. I was telling
like-
this so much to Oleg. I've been telling this to our clients who are. I'm telling this to everybody, and I love when people understand this.
And
too.
to David Spinks, who
And
showed
to
up.
David Spinks, I had a huge fight with David Spinks
and
about
Lera was
this.
trying to educate him about feelings. It was so funny.
Yes.
So I like click somewhere around, like find this episode where Lera educates David Spinks about.
Yes, that is.
It's amazing. And like she does it to all the speakers who try to bring up KPIs or business values, and she's like, dude, you are wrong.
No, usually it's like about shut the fuck up, but like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I also think like there is a very valid point. Like at the end of the day, like a business is not just gonna pay me. Unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
Like I'm like, I can't just sit and nerd out about fandom all day. Like, dang. Like, but like if I was in an academic context, like I do have friends in academia who are studying fandom, and they're like, but that's like an academic context. But we all kind of know that academia isn't always real life. Like, and so like as someone, like I went and got my master's degree, I keep like daydreaming about that PhD one day every so often. I'm like, maybe I'll go back and just like nerd out and get a doctorate, cool stuff. But TBD. But I think like at the end of the day, because like we do need money, we do need like a business is not just going to pay me to like hang out and talk about fandom. So it's about
That's very
building
sad.
like, yeah, it's like, come on guys, work on that. But I think also on that same thing, we have to prove that value. So I think like, kind of putting on, I don't want to be like the soapbox, but like kind of putting on the hat of like why I chose to orbit and why I like what they do is they take that very holistic approach. It's like, what is that? Like, can you have recurring relationships? Like, can you help people actually identify trends that will keep people around? And can you see if they're continuing to interact with you? Like, are they just coming in for a promotion, or have you built a relationship with them? And what does that relationship look like? And how has that relationship even evolved over time? So, tracking those types of things, I think is so important to communities. And it can even mean a little bit more than the traditional like $sign metric. Because I think like
So you're saying...
I came from commerce. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you're saying that you think with Orbit it's theoretically possible to put some numbers to emotions and relations. That's what I hear from you.
Not always. I think not always. Because you can't, you can't quantify, can't be like, I like you at a 7.2 scale. But I can
But that's
say
what
like...
Orbit does.
Yeah.
I mean like, and totally they do have a love score, but like when you think about it, we're actually also being like, one of the things is we actually do think about how, are they coming in here frequently? Are they coming back for more? Are someone continuing to like rehearse and be here time after time and time again? So like, I think that's where it kind of pays off. Comparing it to commerce, right? So I came from commerce, did a lot of e-commerce, and it is all about, okay, what is your conversions for the month? Like, what did you hit the conversions you need to hit? How many purchases did that influencer drive? Which is cool, but that's a very salesy way of looking at things. And so like, if I don't have to do that, that's great. Like, I don't care if they've driven 50,000 purchases. Like, obviously we need to like, unfortunately, again, we can't necessarily do that, but can we just predict health as a measure of like, are people active? Are people engaged? Are they willing to stick around for more?
I wonder when you say are people engaged, and we have already talked about that toxicity in the fandoms, how to measure are people engaged in hate training some other part of the community or just loving?
Training, Anna?
I
Like,
don't know.
if you're like, but like you have people who go
I
out
just
and
made up
have
that
like,
word.
like company, like you have people at organizations or like, let's go back to our Bond example, right? Like, and be like, if I were like, I really don't want this new Bond movie to come out. I don't like it. It's not great. And I just start creating a lot of like media buzz about like how much I like get all my friends and I'm like, let's go negative, downvote all these Bond things. That's a very real thing that happens sometimes. And I think it's like, but here's where like the human side of it, it's like no tool, no description will ever kind of really tell you that. It's kind of like you have to be human and be watching it. That's why community, advocates and managers and community operations people exist, is because you need to have your eyes and heart on the ground in some ways. It's kind of a brutal job. Like, it's like you got to be able to like take the wins and celebrate the wins, but you also got to be able to take the punches. And oftentimes like you're that first line of like being mindful of it. And so no matter like your tool that you're using, like, yes, that's increased activity, but like you need to be mindful of like and also how am I hearing the community in a way that
Oh.
like gives them a safe space to like output and like put energy in a way that's healthy. Like it's okay to not like something. That's totally cool.
I'm digesting what you have said. And also, I have been watching our Orbit account, and that's on the screen right now.
Ah.
And know what? Like, Anna got a bigger score than Lera from Orbit. So, Anna, you're much cooler than Lera. Well, not much, but still, by a few hundreds.
My love score is higher.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, it's not score, it's activities. And
I was thinking that love
yeah.
score sounds like a name of rom-com. What's your love score?
Score.
Yesterday, Anna did not know that her love score was higher than Lera's. Let's see how they
let me
find out.
So your love score is 6.5 and Lera's love score is 6.9. Again, it's also on the screen.
Oh, so my love score is
Yes.
higher.
Yes.
But
it
I think
is.
like the thing from that to take away is like if you have an event or a podcast or tracking like, oh, did you have listeners to this one? Okay, did they show up to the next one? Did they show up to the next one? Did they show up to the next one? And kind of looking at that as like that metric of like, that's a lot how like we use Orbit. So I'm like, when we do an event, we're like, okay, this person initially entered the community for the event, but did they come back to the next one? Did they come back to the next one? Did they maybe tweet about us after an event? How has their activity changed based on certain metrics or like things like that? And that lets like, like the changes within your community. But again, like if you're not social listening and you're not being human in the first place, you're not going to pick up that whole thing. So
And
TLDR, go back to being human.
That's the thing, and I don't know how to feel about like tracking each user step. I mean, like when Lera browses her Instagram feed, she's afraid to like or to comment because like it's gonna be seen everywhere, and like social pressure, and like and measuring our users, like, and then probably acknowledging
I
it.
don't think it's bad thing because like measuring, for example, that we get from Discord, it's like, I don't know how much some person writes in the chat. So like as a community manager, you see this anyway. You just like don't
quantify.
Yeah,
We don't
quantify, but you quite see that like this person pretty active in my community. It's just like gives you more like better statistics. So
But
I
it's
don't
also-
think
human. Is it human?
Yeah, it's being
You operate on
I mean-
numbers.
here's the alternate thing. So if we want to truly build inclusive, kind communities, we have to pay attention to who's not there. And we all have biases. We all do. Everybody here has some bias.
Mhm.
And I think it's kind of a nice way to kind of keep in touch and be like, you know what? How am I engaging these different segments? So but that's manual work. You got to do that. Like there's no tool that's going to be like, how am I doing that? And I think that's what we really have to dial it down to. It's still manual work. You still have to do the personal relationship building one person at a time, which is so important. And I think if we don't take that like as a serious, like take that to heart as community folk or fandom folk for that matter, that's when we're going to start to see those fractures. And that's when we're going to start to see issues occur. It's like we have to be mindful of how we're engaging different segments and how do we use this? How do we use things mindfully?
Can we touch a bit the mental health thing? Because you also wanted
Yeah.
to talk about this. And like, I think as a community and like managing communities and mental health, it's like...
For the manager or for the user of the community or for the member?
yeah, like which side do you want to discuss, by the way?
I mean, I can do both. I think like I've been in communities that I'm like, I got to leave because this ain't meant for me.
Let's start
been-
then from community
yeah.
manager side, because I think they get all the punches, how you said, they're in the front line. So
They are slapped all the time.
yeah, they're slapped all the
That's why
time.
Lera pushes me on the front line usually. I'm fine with getting slapped. Like,
So yeah,
Yeah,
like
I mean-
tough skin.
how to keep
I
yourself
think-
sane.
I think like everybody, like every online being, whether you're a community manager, you're just an online person, you need to kind of establish your own like ethics and morals code, right? Like you need to be like, this is what I stand for, this is what I don't, and then be firm in that. And that's okay. Like it's not a personal attack. It's just kind of this is what I stand for, this is what I feel passionate about. Not asking everybody to kind of jump in on that, but that's what you have to do. And then you have to be mindful of where are you spending your energy on the internet. So I, like probably many other people, have the bad habit of doom scrolling. Sometimes I see bad news and then I have to go down the rabbit hole. And then I'm like, why do I feel like crap? And I'm like, oh, you just read posts about whatever tragic thing happening of the day is for 2 hours, not helpful. But I think when we kind of zoom out, we realize that's really not a healthy behavior, not a healthy way of spending my time. So I think, like, obviously you can't shield yourself from everything, but really taking those mental health breaks and like, how am I aligning myself with my core values and putting myself in places that matters.
You cannot shield like yourself from like literally everything. I don't know, some person comes like, I don't know, I see pretty quite often on Twitter some community managers are complaining like, okay, this person came to me and like wished me death, so you know, like you cannot kind of avoid that. But
you
like
can't.
when he's writing like you in DMs and like for example, and you read it and you're
And
like,
that's your job.
and you're like, and you have to do something about this. So
yeah, no, I think that's a really valid problem. And like, unfortunately, I've had that happen to me on Twitter and it's not great. It does not make you feel great. First off, it's like, lean into your friends. Like, have a trusted friend. Like when I've had things happen, it's like, have a trusted friend that you can hand over your account to and be like, can you just, like, I need to log out. Logging out is an acceptable answer. Turning off your notifications, totally acceptable. When I take days off, I turn off my notifications.
I do
and
the
then
same.
I just clear them out. Like I'm like, I don't need to know about what happened between. It's like, my life is not going to drastically change because I missed one Discord message and blah blah blah. For the most part, you know, like obviously be mindful, but also that's a transparency is a two-way street, right? So you, as you're a community manager, that's either you can get in contact with me XYZ, you can get in contact with someone if you need something urgently XYZ. I will be gone from here to here. Also establishing those boundaries. So like, I don't necessarily give my cell phone number out to people I don't necessarily know that well, or like I don't trust. That's a little more private information. That's okay. That's not for everybody. And I think also having those boundaries, like I don't answer calls after times. I don't answer work emails after certain times. You have to protect those spaces. I do very much. Yeah, like keep like, if like I have like an iPad and like my personal computer, I try not to keep like work stuff on there just because it doesn't need to be on there. I can close. I want to be able to shut the laptop, out of sight, out of mind. I'm okay. Obviously, like with Twitter and Discord and even Luma, sometimes those lines get a little blurred of like, I also think I have this idea, like, I don't just be like, oh, you're my friend on Twitter. Like we're likely carrying the relationship across platform if it's an authentic, true relationship, right? Like, but unfortunately that goes for our haters as well. And I think like, you just have to be mindful and protect those spaces. Protect those, like, curate what you like, curate all of that, and have trusted friends. And also, like, I'm a big believer, like, if you put good out in the world, it'll come back to you. You just gotta be good. Like, it may not be direct, and it may not be, like, you may not see it right in that instance, but, like, just don't be a jerk on the internet.
I'm watching Lera and there is so much love in her eyes towards yourself. Like, so Lera, did you find a role model?
Yes,
eventually?
Of course.
Or not eventually?
Well, thank you.
Of course I do. Oh, okay. So, like, I think it's time to finish our podcast because my back hurts after the gym and I need to take care of my health.
Yes.
I just cannot sit anymore. I'm sorry. So, thank you
We're
very
all
much, Erin. That was
thank
very
you guys. This
interesting.
is super fun. I love nerding out about this stuff. So
Yes. I will send you all TikToks that I was talking about.
Please do. I mean, like, I'm very deep in the berries and cream TikTok. So I mean, like, I'm very concerned though, because like if you send me something that throws off my algorithm, so we're not in berries and TikTok, I'm going to be a little upset because I love berries and cream TikTok.
Sure thing. I will find something especially for you.
Perfect.
So thank you very much. That was very
TikTok
fun.
Is the best. I highly recommend to go to the bees TikTok.
Bees TikTok, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I do. I might need to see this bees TikTok. So
Yeah.
We will send you. Okay. Thank you very much
you.
again. Goodbye.
thank you.
It's
Have a
so
good
fun
one.
how we've been saying goodbye for like 5 minutes without not being able to part. Goodbye, people.
I know.
It was
Bye.
cool. It was cool. Goodbye.
Yeah.